She was 30 years old, worth $4 billion, and she was going to die on a mountain no one had ever heard of. The helicopter was spinning. The instrument panel was on fire. The pilot slumped forward against the controls, unresponsive, blood darkening the collar of his uniform. Outside the cracked windshield, the blizzard was a solid white wall. No horizon, no ground, no sky. Just wind that screamed like something alive and snow that hit the glass like gravel. Sloane Whitmore pressed both hands flat against the door and told herself to breathe. She had survived boardroom coups, hostile takeovers, and men twice her age who had tried to bury her. She had never once believed she would die afraid. She was wrong. If this story already has you gripping your seat, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Hit that subscribe button and drop your city or country in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Like the video, follow the channel, and don't go anywhere. Because what happens next will change everything you think you know about survival, guilt, and the kind of love that only comes after you've already lost everything once. The storm rolled in off the Cascade Range at 4:47 in the afternoon, and by 5 o'clock it had turned the entire upper elevation into something that stopped being weather and started being a threat. Ethan Cole knew that feeling. He'd spent enough winters on this mountain to read it the way other men read a newspaper. The shift in barometric pressure, the particular way the wind changed direction twice before it committed, the color the sky turned in the hour before it decided to kill you. He'd pulled his firewood in early, checked the propane, and told Lily she wasn't going anywhere near the front porch until morning. "Dad," Lily had said in the flat, patient tone that 7-year-olds use when they think they understand the world better than they do. "It's just snow." "It's not just snow," he'd said, and left it at that. He'd started heating soup when he heard it. A sound underneath the wind, irregular and wrong, the mechanical churn of rotor blades fighting conditions they weren't built for. He moved to the window and listened with his whole body the way the military had trained him to, not just with his ears, letting the sound tell him everything it could. The helicopter was in trouble. It was close. And then it wasn't making any sound at all. The silence was worse than the noise. He stood there for maybe 3 full seconds, staring out at the white nothing beyond his window, and made a decision he didn't put into words because putting it into words would have made it a choice he could second guess. He pulled on his gear. Lily was in the living room with her book when he came out of the gear closet in his full cold weather kit. Insulated base layer, wool mid layer, waterproof shell, face mask, headlamp already strapped to his forehead. She looked up and studied him with those calm, dark eyes that still, after 7 years, occasionally knocked the breath right out of him because they were her mother's eyes and not his. "Where are you going?" "Heard something fall on the mountain. Could be an aircraft." "It's a blizzard." "Yeah." She held his gaze for a moment. She didn't ask him not to go. She was 7, but she already understood something about her father that most adults didn't. That when Ethan Cole decided he was going somewhere, the weather was not the part that mattered. "Don't be dead," she said, and went back to her book. He grabbed the emergency pack from behind the door, the one that never changed. The one that had been packed and repacked so many times, the motions were just muscle memory now. Flares, trauma kit, mylar blankets, rope, the handheld radio. He zipped it, shouldered it, and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit him like something physical, a full-body impact. The wind was running at maybe 40 miles an hour with gusts higher, and the snow it carried wasn't falling so much as being thrown, horizontal and dense, reducing visibility to somewhere between 10 and 15 feet. He clicked on the headlamp and started moving upslope, angling toward where the sound had come from, navigating by memory and the particular texture of the terrain under his boots. He'd walked this mountain hundreds of times in darkness, in rain, in conditions that would have had most people sitting down to wait it out. He moved through the storm the way water moves through rock, not fighting it, just finding the path it left. About 600 meters from the cabin, he smelled smoke. He turned toward it, came up over a ridgeline, and stopped. The helicopter had come down hard in a narrow depression between 2 rock outcroppings, and it had not come down cleanly. The tail section was crumpled at a 45-degree angle. The main rotor had separated and driven one blade into the snow 3 feet away from the fuselage, and the cockpit was burning. Not fully, not yet. But the heat shimmer coming off the left side of the cabin told him the fuel was compromised and the rest was a question of minutes. He went down the slope at a controlled run, angling toward the passenger door. 2. Inside the helicopter, Sloane had stopped screaming and started thinking, which was either a very good sign or a very bad one. The crash had happened fast and then slow, in the way crashes apparently always did. She'd heard later that this was the brain under extreme stress, compressing and expanding time arbitrarily, but in the moment it just felt like the world breaking. 1 second the aircraft was fighting the weather, the pilot's voice tight and controlled on the radio, calling a mayday she couldn't fully hear over the wind, and then there was a jarring impact, a second impact, and then stillness except for the creaking of metal and the smell of burning insulation. She'd assessed herself first. Right shoulder, pain when she moved it, possibly separated, not usable. Left wrist, definitely sprained, possibly worse. Her face was bleeding from somewhere near her hairline, and when she touched it, her fingers came back red and already cooling in the frozen air coming through the cracked windshield. Her ribs complained when she breathed, but didn't feel broken. She was functional. She was alive. Marcus, the pilot, was not moving. She'd reached forward and pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck and found a pulse, slow, irregular, but present, and had immediately understood that she could not move him without knowing what was wrong, and that she could not do nothing because the smell of smoke was getting stronger and the temperature inside the aircraft was already dropping. She'd tried the radio, static and fragments. She'd fired the emergency locator beacon, found it mounted under the co-pilot seat, activated it, and placed it back. That was the right move. That was what you did. Then she'd sat down, pressed a folded piece of cloth from her jacket pocket against the cut on her head, and started talking to Marcus even though he couldn't hear her, because the alternative was sitting alone inside a burning aircraft on a mountain in the middle of a blizzard and letting the fear run the show, and she had not survived everything she'd survived to go out that way. "You're okay," she told him. "You did everything right. Help is coming." She didn't know if help was coming. She was saying it for herself. The passenger door handle was jammed, impact deformation, the frame had twisted, and Ethan didn't waste time with it. He pulled the compact pry tool from the side pocket of his pack, got it into the gap between door and frame, and applied controlled, specific pressure until he felt the mechanism give. The door swung out and cold air poured in. He leaned into the opening. A woman was sitting in the rear of the cabin, one hand pressed to her head, the other braced against the back of the co-pilot's seat. She was, and this registered with the flat clinical efficiency he'd been trained to apply to triage, conscious, oriented, bleeding from a scalp laceration, favoring her right side, and looking at him with an expression that was not quite shock and not quite relief, but something raw and unfinished between the two. "Are you injured?" he said. "Yes," she said. "The pilot needs to come out first." He noted that. Not a request. A statement. And she wasn't wrong. He moved to the cockpit, checked the pilot's airway, pulse, neck stability. Head trauma was likely, a cut along the jawline, possible shoulder injury from impact. Not safe to move without a board and collar, but they didn't have a board and collar, and the fuel smell was now specific and immediate. "I'm going to move him," Ethan said. "This is going to be rough." "Do what you have to do." He got the pilot out through the passenger door with her helping, awkward and painful and nothing close to textbook extraction, and laid him in the snow behind the aircraft with one of the mylar blankets from the pack tucked beneath him as a thermal barrier. Then he went back in for the woman. "Can you stand?" "Yes." She stood. She wobbled slightly but didn't fall. "Arm over my shoulder. Don't put weight on your right side." "How did you You're protecting it. Come on." She came on. They were maybe 30 feet from the aircraft when it went up. Not a Hollywood explosion, but the specific, serious, catastrophic thing a fuel fire becomes when it finally finds enough oxygen, a deep percussive thump, and then a wave of heat that hit them across the back and lit the snow around them orange. Ethan instinctively turned into her, putting his back between the fireball and her body. Felt the heat wash over the shell of his jacket, and then it was past, and the storm swallowed the light, and they were back in the cold white nothing. She was shaking. Her hand, the left one over his shoulder, gripped him with a strength that was mostly reflex. "Keep moving," he said. "I'm moving," she said, teeth clenched. "I'm moving." The hike back to the cabin took 40 minutes longer than the hike out because he was managing two casualties, the pilot over one shoulder in a modified carry, the woman on his other arm. Through conditions that had gotten worse, not better. He tracked by compass bearing and terrain memory, moving in the silence that fell between wind gusts, stopping twice to reassess the pilot's pulse, and once, when the woman's legs briefly gave out beneath her and she made a sound she immediately swallowed. A sharp intake that she turned into something controlled before it could become what it was. "I've got you," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm fine." She was not fine, but she kept her feet, and she kept moving, and he made note of that in the particular way you made note of something that mattered. The cabin lights appeared through the snow, and she exhaled. The first real exhale she'd allowed herself since the crash, he thought. Well, inside, Lily was not in the living room. She'd left a note on the kitchen table, written in the earnest, deliberate handwriting of someone who'd only recently stopped writing in all capitals. "Made up the spare room. Soup is still warm. Hi, if you're a stranger." Ethan stood in the kitchen for a moment with the note in his hand and then set it down and went to work. He got the pilot onto the bed in the spare room, did a more thorough assessment, stabilized his neck with a folded blanket roll, and made the call on his satellite communicator. The radio was useless in this weather, but the SATCOM worked. To the county emergency line. Mountain rescue was grounded. They'd get there when the storm broke. Best estimate, 6 to 8 hours. He came back to the living room. The woman was sitting on the couch, both hands wrapped around the mug of soup he hadn't even seen her pick up, and she was staring at the fire in the wood stove with an expression that was very far away from the room. "Pilot stable," he said. "Rescue has been notified. They'll come when the weather breaks." She nodded slowly, came back from wherever she'd been. "Thank you," she said. "I don't—" She stopped, started again. "I've been through some bad situations. Board meetings that turned hostile, a hostile acquisition attempt that nearly took everything. I've never been—" She stopped again, and this time she didn't start again right away. "That was the most frightened I've ever been." He sat in the chair across from her. "That's normal." "Is it?" "Fear is information. It means your threat assessment is working." She looked at him for a moment. "That's an unusual way to think about it." "Maybe." The fire popped. The wind pressed at the windows. Outside, the storm ran its full ambition against the mountain, and the mountain held. "I'm Sloan," she said to me. "Ethan." "Do you do that often, Ethan? Walk into blizzards to pull strangers out of burning aircraft?" He considered the question as though it were literal. "Not lately," he said. She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. "What kind of training gives you that?" she asked. And even exhausted and injured and in borrowed clothes, Lily had found her dry socks and a flannel shirt without being asked. She was watching him with a precision that told him she spent her life reading people and found it difficult to stop. "The carry, the triage, the way you moved out there, that's not civilian SAR training." He didn't answer immediately. "Navy," he said. "A long time ago." "SEAL?" He looked at the fire. "A long time ago," he said again. She accepted that. She was smart enough to hear what the repetition meant. Lily appeared in the hallway doorway in her pajamas, unannounced, as was her consistent habit. "Your head is bleeding again," she said to Sloan, with no preamble. Sloan touched the bandage he'd applied, and her fingers came away with fresh red on them. "So it is." "Dad has the good tape," Lily said, with the authority of someone who had needed the good tape before. "It doesn't hurt when it comes off." "That's a very specific recommendation," Sloan said. "I've had a lot of cuts," Lily said, with a kind of philosophical acceptance. Then she turned to Ethan. "She seems okay," she told him, as if offering an assessment he'd been waiting for. "Not like the deer." "The deer?" Sloan asked. "We found a deer last winter," Ethan said. "Had a bad leg." "It was very sad," Lily said. "It had this look." "What look?" Lily thought about it seriously, like it had forgotten it was going to be okay. The room was quiet except for the fire and the wind. Sloan looked at Lily, and then at Ethan, and then back at the fire. "I had that look," she said. "It wasn't a question." "A little," Lily said kindly. "You don't now, though." She patted back down the hallway. A door closed softly. Ethan got up to rebandage Sloane's head, and she sat still for it, neither of them speaking, the storm continuing its argument with the mountain outside, Lily's voice drifting faintly from behind her closed door. She was reading aloud to herself, a habit she'd had since before she could actually read, narrating pictures, and the cabin held its warmth against everything the night was throwing at it, and that was enough. That was enough for now. The storm broke some time before dawn, quietly, the way storms sometimes did after spending all night proving something. The wind dropping first, then the snow thinning, then a silence that felt enormous after hours of pressure. Ethan noticed it from the chair where he'd spent most of the night, not sleeping, but not exactly awake either. That particular state of alert rest the military had drilled into him so thoroughly it had become his default mode, whether he wanted it or not. He'd checked on Marcus twice through the night, pulse steady, color improving, no signs of neurological deterioration that he could identify with what he had available. And each time he passed the living room on his way back, he'd seen Sloane on the couch, eyes closed, the spare blanket pulled up to her chin, and he'd adjusted the wood stove and gone back to his chair. He was making coffee when she woke up. He heard her before he saw her. The particular sound of someone taking inventory of their body after a night of injury-adjacent sleep, a careful shifting, a suppressed sound that wasn't quite a groan. Then her feet on the floor, and then she was in the kitchen doorway in Lily's oversized flannel shirt and the sweatpants he'd left folded on the arm of the couch, her dark hair loose and still slightly matted on one side where the wound had bled through the bandage again during the night. She looked, in the flat, honest light of early morning, like someone who had been in a helicopter crash 20 hours ago. "Coffee," she said. Not a question. Not quite a request. More like an identification of something she needed to be near. "Sit down," he said. "I'll bring it." She sat at the kitchen table without arguing, which told him she felt worse than she was letting on. He poured 2 mugs and sat across from her, and for a while neither of them said anything, which was fine. The kitchen was warm, and the light coming through the window was the pale gray blue of post-storm morning, and somewhere down the hall Lily was still asleep, and the coffee was strong enough to be useful. "How's your shoulder?" he asked. "Functional." She rolled it slightly, and her jaw tightened. "That's a relative term. I can tape it better once you've eaten something. I've got ibuprofen." "I've already had some." She curled both hands around the mug. "I found them on the bathroom shelf. I left a note on the mirror so you'd know. I hope that's all right." He glanced toward the hallway. "You left a note on the mirror." "I didn't want you to think I was going through your things." "I wasn't. I was just... The shoulder woke me up around 3, and I didn't want to wake you." He was quiet for a moment. "You weren't going to wake me." "You weren't asleep," she said. It was flat and factual, no accusation in it. "I could tell from the chair." He picked up his coffee. "How did you know I wasn't asleep?" he asked. "The way you were sitting, your weight was forward, both feet on the floor." She paused. "My father was in the army. I know what a man looks like when he's standing watch." He nodded slowly. "Marcus is better this morning. His color came up overnight. When the road clears, we should get him to a hospital. He'll need imaging, but I don't think it's as bad as it looked." That's good," she exhaled. "That's really good." And for just a second, something moved across her face that wasn't the carefully managed composure she'd been maintaining since the crash. Something that was closer to the actual impact of what had happened, and then it was gone. She pressed her thumb against the rim of the mug and didn't speak for a moment. "You keep doing that," Ethan said. "Doing what?" Pulling it back, the reaction. She looked at him steadily. "Occupational habit." "What's your occupation?" She held his gaze for a beat that was maybe a half-second longer than necessary. "I run a company," she said. Lily came out at 7:15, assessed the situation in the kitchen with the calm thoroughness of a child who had long since adjusted to unexpected visitors, poured herself a glass of orange juice, and sat down at the table next to Sloane as though this were a regular Tuesday. "Your face looks better," she told Sloane. "The cut's closing." "Thank you," Sloane said. That's the most encouraging thing anyone said to me in 2 days. You can have breakfast with us, Lily said. Dad makes eggs. He only knows how to make them one way, but they're good. I know other ways, Ethan said from the stove. He makes them the same way every time, Lily said to Sloane in a confidential tone. He adds too much pepper. I add the right amount of pepper. He thinks that, Lily said. Sloane looked at the side of Ethan's face, something quiet and unguarded in her expression. Then she looked back at Lily. How long have you two been up here? She asked. 4 years, Lily said. Since I was 3. I don't really remember before. Do you like it? Lily considered this with genuine seriousness. I like that it's quiet. Dad says quiet is something people forget to want until they don't have it anymore. She thought about it another second. I like my school, but it's far. I go on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The other days Dad teaches me. What does he teach you? Navigation, Lily said, and how to read weather, and math, but that's boring. And sometimes he reads to me from books that are too old for me, but I like them anyway. She paused. He doesn't teach me about the Navy. I know he was in the Navy because there's a picture, but he doesn't really talk about it. The kitchen was briefly quiet. The eggs crackled in the pan. Lily, Ethan said, not sharply, just a signal. And Lily seemed to receive it because she took a long drink of orange juice and moved on without any apparent resentment. Do you have kids? She asked Sloane. No, Sloane said. Do you want them? Lily, Ethan said. What? It's a normal question. It's personal. Everything's personal, Lily said, with the particular serene logic of someone who had not yet learned to treat that as a problem. Sloane smiled. Ethan saw it from the stove. Real this time, not the managed version, a little lopsided because of the tenderness near her mouth where she'd bitten the inside of her cheek during the crash. It changed her face in a way that the composed professional version of her didn't allow for, and he turned back to the eggs. The county road crew reached the turnoff by mid-morning, and the ambulance followed 20 minutes later. Marcus was loaded out on a stretcher, conscious now and embarrassed about it in the specific way that men who spent their lives being competent were embarrassed when they found themselves horizontal and dependent. And Ethan stood at the end of the drive and watched the ambulance work its way back down the mountain road. Sloane stood beside him. I should go with him, she said. The paramedic said he's stable. They've got it. I know, She stopped. He works for me. He's been flying for the company for 9 years. I feel responsible. You're not responsible for the weather. She didn't say anything to that, just stood looking down the road after the ambulance with an expression he couldn't fully read. A car was coming up behind the road crew. A black SUV with out-of-state plates, moving carefully on the wet road. It pulled to the side of the drive, and 2 people got out. A man in a suit that was completely wrong for the terrain, and a woman in slightly more sensible boots who was already on her phone. The suited man had the look of someone whose job was to stand between his employer and whatever the world threw at her. Ms. Whitmore, the suited man said. He was looking at her with the specific controlled relief of someone who had spent the night being professionally anxious. We've had people looking for you since the distress signal. The weather blocked. I know, Daniel, she said. I'm fine. She glanced at the woman on the phone. Tell whoever that is that I'm fine and they can stand down. The woman on the phone nodded and stepped away. Daniel, who was apparently the kind of assistant who doubled as a security detail, looked at Ethan with a measuring expression. This is Ethan Cole, Sloane said. He pulled me out of the aircraft. Him and his daughter. Daniel's expression shifted. Sir, he said, and extended a hand. Thank you. Ethan shook it. Ms. Whitmore. The woman was back. There are calls. There are always calls, Sloane said. Give me 20 minutes. The 2 of them retreated to the SUV with the efficiency of people trained to make themselves scarce on command. Sloane turned back to Ethan. There was something working behind her eyes, some calculation or decision she was in the middle of making, and she looked at him for a moment with an openness that he suspected she didn't usually let show. Ethan Cole, she said. That's me. Can I ask you something direct? You can ask. Why are you up here, specifically? A man with your training, your background is... You didn't come up a mountain to grow a beard and disappear for no reason. People don't do that for no reason. The morning air was cold and clean after the storm, the kind of air that made everything feel too sharp. He looked at the tree line, at the snow sitting heavy on the spruce branches, at the specific quality of high-elevation winter light that he had come to know as well as anything in his life. "Lost someone," he said. "I'm sorry." "Lily's mother." Sloane was quiet. "And you blame yourself," she said. It wasn't a question. He looked at her. She met his eyes with the directness of someone who'd been where that road went and wasn't going to pretend she hadn't. "What makes you say that?" "Because men who just grieve don't disappear," she said. "They fall apart. They rebuild. Men who disappear are carrying something they can't put down." He didn't answer. "You don't have to tell me," she said. "I'm not trying to—" "Aircraft accident," he said. 3 years after I left the service. She was on a transport flight. Something went wrong with the navigation system, and the pilot came down wrong in bad weather. They recovered the black box, but the investigation— He stopped, restarted. "The investigation closed without a clear cause. They called it pilot error." The silence that followed had a different quality than the silences before it. Sloane had gone very still beside him. Not the stillness of shock, something more careful than that. Something that looked from the outside like a person choosing very precisely what to do with their next breath. "What was the flight?" she asked. Her voice was level, but it was the kind of level that required active maintenance. "Private charter," he said. "Mountain Region Transit. Company called Whitmore Aviation." He felt her stillness become something else. A full-body response she contained with the rigidity of someone who'd been caught completely off guard and refused to show it. "I know that company," she said, and her voice, for the first time since he'd met her, had a fracture in it. She didn't tell him why she knew it. Not then. She excused herself to take the calls that apparently couldn't wait any longer, and he watched her walk to the SUV, watched the shift back into the composed professional version, the shoulders straightening, the stride changing, and he went back inside and washed the breakfast dishes and thought about the look on her face. He'd done enough interrogation work to know when someone was holding information. He'd also done enough of it to know when someone had just been given information that rearranged something fundamental and was trying to figure out what to do about it. Lily appeared at his elbow with a dish towel. "She knows something," Lily said. Ethan handed her a plate. "Don't listen to adult conversations." "I wasn't listening. I was just watching." She dried the plate carefully, set it on the rack. "Her face changed when you said the thing about Mom." He rinsed the mug he was holding. "Yeah," he said. "I know. Is that bad?" "I don't know yet." Lily thought about this while she dried another plate. "She doesn't seem bad," she said. "She seems like someone who found out something terrible and doesn't know what to do yet." Ethan looked at his daughter. "You get that from watching her face for 20 minutes?" "And breakfast," Lily said. "People are different at breakfast. They haven't put themselves together yet." He went back to the dishes without answering, because what was there to say to that? Sloane came back inside an hour later and asked if she could use his table. "For what?" he said. "Work," she said. "My laptop was in the helicopter, but Daniel has one in the car, and I need—" She stopped, reorganized. "I need to look something up. Can I sit here?" "Sit wherever you want." She sat at the kitchen table with the laptop Daniel had brought in, and she worked with the focused, slightly grim efficiency of someone trying to confirm something they didn't want confirmed. Ethan left her to it, went out to split the wood that hadn't gotten split the day before, let the physical work do what physical work did for him, occupy the body enough that the mind could process things sideways, without the direct pressure of sitting still with them. He was still outside when she appeared at the back door. "Ethan." He set the axe down. Something in her voice. She was standing in the doorway with the laptop, and she looked like someone who had just run a race and wasn't sure yet whether she'd won or lost. "Come inside," she said. "Please." He came inside. She set the laptop on the table, turned it to face him. On the screen was a document, a corporate internal file, dense with technical language, dated 11 years earlier. He scanned it without touching the laptop. "What am I looking at?" he said. An internal engineering report from Whitmore Aviation's Navigation Systems Division, she said, filed 11 years ago, 14 months before your wife's crash. She pointed to a section he couldn't fully read from where he was standing. Their engineers identified an instability in the low-altitude terrain following mode of the GX-7 navigation system. Specifically in mountainous terrain, in reduced visibility conditions, the system could produce incorrect altitude readings, overcorrecting for terrain that wasn't there, driving aircraft lower than they should be. He was very still. The report recommended grounding every aircraft running that system pending a software patch, she said. It was filed, logged, and then she pointed to a small notation at the bottom of the document. Deferred, pending cost-benefit review. The kitchen was very quiet. How did you find this? He said. I know where to look, she said. I've been the CEO of that company for 4 years. I inherited it from my father when he retired. She paused. There are a lot of things I have found since taking over that I was not meant to find. This is not even the worst of them. But it is... She stopped. Her composure had another fracture in it, wider this time. It may be the most consequential thing I have ever found, because I don't think your wife's crash was the only one. He sat down. He sat down in the kitchen chair, and he looked at the table surface, and he breathed, and neither of them spoke for a long time. The thing about guilt was that it had a specific weight. Ethan had spent 3 years learning the exact dimensions of the particular way it sat in the chest, the way it changed the quality of sleep, the way it surfaced in the moment between waking and full consciousness when defenses were down, and the brain just told you the unvarnished version of what it believed. He had blamed himself for not being there, for leaving the service, for letting his wife take a charter flight, for not driving her himself, for a dozen specific choices that in the architecture of his grief had assembled themselves into a case against him that he had never seriously challenged because it felt true. It had felt true for 3 years. He sat at the kitchen table and looked at an 11-year-old engineering report that suggested it wasn't. Ethan. Her voice was quiet. Not soft exactly. It was too careful to be soft, but quiet and direct, and without any performance in it. I am the CEO of the company that built the system that may have killed your wife. I want you to know that I'm going to do something about this. Not because you saved my life. I don't mean it as a trade. I mean that what I just read is not something I can unknow, and I don't want to. He looked at her. You don't have to convince me of anything, she said. I know what this company did. I know it better than you do right now. And I know that someone in a position of authority made a decision that your wife, and probably other people, paid for. How many crashes, he said. His voice came out flat and controlled in the way his voice always came out flat and controlled when he was feeling something he didn't have the vocabulary for. She looked at the laptop, then back at him. I don't know yet. I found 3 flagged incident reports that reference the GX-7 system in the last 6 years. Yours may not even be in the internal records. If it was attributed to pilot error, there may be no internal notation of the system. So the pilot got blamed. Yes, he breathed out. The pilot was 29, he said. He had an 11-year-old daughter. The investigation found that he'd descended too fast in poor visibility. His certificate was posthumously flagged. Sloane's face did something complicated and specific. I know, she said. I am so sorry. Don't apologize, he said. Not yet. Find out what you can find out. Then we'll talk about what sorry looks like. She nodded once and went back to the laptop. She stayed 3 more days. There was no discussion about it. No formal decision made over dinner or negotiated in the hallway. It just happened the way things that are inevitable sometimes happen, by small increments and the absence of any compelling reason to go a different direction. The road was technically passable after the first day, but Marcus needed to be seen again, and Sloane's assistant was in the nearest town handling the logistics of the destroyed aircraft, and the work she was doing on her laptop at Ethan's kitchen table required the kind of concentration that didn't survive hotel lobbies. That was what she said. Ethan didn't argue with it. He watched her work. She worked the way people worked when the thing they were looking for was something they'd half known was there, and the looking felt more like confirming than discovering. She made calls in the driveway, walking in slow circles in the cold, her breath fogging, her voice inaudible through the window glass, but her face legible from 30 feet in the way faces always were when someone was managing a difficult conversation. She'd come back inside looking tighter, pour more coffee, sit back down. On the second afternoon, Lily brought her a plate of crackers and cheese without being asked and set it beside the laptop and went back to her homework. And Sloane looked at the plate for a moment with an expression that had nothing businesslike in it at all. "She's remarkable," Sloane said when Lily was out of earshot. "Yeah," Ethan said. He was at the counter with his back to her, reloading the first aid kit he'd pulled apart during the crash response. "Does she know about her mother?" "The broad version. She knows she died in an accident. She doesn't know the details." How do you manage?" "The two of you." He organized the gauze pads back into the case by size. "One day at a time," which sounds like a thing people say when they don't have a better answer, but it's actually just the only honest way to describe it. "Is she happy?" "Up here, I mean." "I think so. I'd rather she had more kids around. She's going to want that more as she gets older." He paused. "I know this isn't forever. I know I'm going to have to—" He stopped. "She deserves the world. She shouldn't have to live inside just my version of hiding from it." The kitchen was quiet for a moment. "Is that what this is?" Sloane asked. "Hiding?" He turned around and looked at her across the kitchen. "Yeah," he said. "That's what this is." She held his gaze. Not the managing, measuring look from before. Something more open than that. Something that cost her slightly more to leave undefended. "I think you're better at it than you wanted to be," she said. He picked up the first aid kit and put it back on the shelf. "Meaning?" "Meaning you're very good at being here. At this." She gestured at the cabin, at the space, the quiet, the routine, the way Lily is. "You did that. You built that. That's not nothing. I also built it so I didn't have to go back out there." "I know," she said. "Both things can be true." He sat down at the table across from her, and for a moment they were just two people sitting across a kitchen table with the afternoon light coming flat and cold through the window, and the laptop between them and the weight of what was in it. "Tell me about her," Sloane said. "Your wife, if you want. You don't have to." He looked at his hands on the table. "Her name was Claire," he said. "She was funny, not in the charming, performative way. She was funny in the way where she saw things sideways and just described them accurately, and somehow it was always funnier than the joke version would have been." He paused. "She was a terrible cook. She knew she was a terrible cook, and she kept trying anyway, which I respected. She couldn't stand silence. She needed noise, music, or TV, or at minimum me talking about something, anything. And I was the wrong person for that because I have always been comfortable being quiet. So we had this dynamic where she was always looking for me to give her something, and I was always forgetting to." He stopped. "She sounds real," Sloane said. "She was." Sloane seemed to be searching for the right version of what she meant. "Some people talk about the people they've lost, and they describe a saint. You described someone with a terrible cooking habit and noise requirements." "She was not a saint," he said. "She was Claire." Sloane was quiet for a moment. "I think that's how you know you actually loved someone. When you don't need to make them better than they were to keep loving them." He looked at her. She was looking at the laptop, not at him, and he had the sense that she'd said it for some reason that wasn't entirely about him. "Are you carrying something like that?" he asked. She looked up. "Yes," she said, and didn't say anything else, and he didn't push. On the evening of the second day, she found the second report. He was reading in the living room, one of the Lily-adjacent books, a novel he'd read 3 times already but kept coming back to. When she came to the doorway and stood there with the laptop under her arm and a look on her face that he'd seen before. Once. On a team member delivering a casualty notification. There were 5, she said. 5 crashes where the GX7 system was a contributing factor in the internal flight data. 5. 3 were attributed to pilot error in the final reports. 1 was attributed to weather. 1 was determined to be mechanical failure. And the mechanic who signed off on the aircraft was dismissed 18 months later for unrelated reasons, but his dismissal paperwork has notes about his performance, raising concerns about the GX7. Ethan set the book down. Who knew? He said. I'm still building that picture, she said. But the chief engineer who wrote the original report retired 4 years after it was filed. His pension was structured with a non-disclosure clause. The executive who signed the deferral order, she stopped, reorganized. He was my father's CFO for 6 years. He retired when my father retired. The room was silent. Your father knew, Ethan said. She sat down on the arm of the couch and looked at the floor and didn't say anything for a moment. And he let her have the moment because it was the kind of thing that needed a moment. I don't know yet, she said. I genuinely don't know yet. It's possible he did. It's also possible he had a CFO who managed to insulate him from it for reasons that had more to do with the CFO's career than my father's complicity. She looked up. I'm not saying that to protect him. I'm saying it because I actually don't know. And I've learned not to be certain about things I'm not certain about. That's more self-awareness than most people in your position operate with. My position hasn't required much self-awareness until now, she said, and there was something in it that wasn't self-pity but was adjacent to it. The recognition of a gap, an understanding that she had been running a company she hadn't fully seen. I took over 4 years ago. I've been focused on growth strategy, market position, modernizing the fleet. She stopped. I've been running the company I thought I inherited, not the one I actually did. She stood back up. She was restless in the way that people were restless when they'd found something that made stillness feel irresponsible. I'm going to ground the remaining aircraft that use the GX7 system, she said. I know there are 12 still in service. They should have been retired, but they were in the regional division that doesn't report directly to me, and She stopped. None of that is an excuse. I'm going to ground them. Monday morning. That'll be visible, Ethan said. Yes. It'll raise questions about why. Yes. Your board will want answers. My board will be furious, she said. There are people on my board who were there when that original report was filed. When I start pulling threads on this, some of those threads are going to end at people who still sit in those chairs. She paused. That's going to be a problem. He looked at her steadily. Are you going to do it anyway? She looked back at him with the expression she got when she thought someone was asking her something they already knew the answer to. 5 crashes, she said. 5. And your wife. And that pilot who lost his certificate. And Lily, he said, who grew up without her mother. Sloane's face did the thing it did sometimes when something hit it that it hadn't seen coming. A fractional shift, barely readable, and then back to composed. But he caught it. Yes, she said quietly. And Lily. On the 3rd morning, she packed her things, which wasn't much. The clothes Ethan had found her, the laptop, a phone that had apparently been in her jacket chest pocket during the crash, and survived. She did it methodically and without drama, the way someone packed who had been packing for themselves since they were young. Lily sat at the table and watched her with the frank observation of a child who didn't try to be subtle about the fact that she was studying you. Are you coming back? Lily asked. Lily, Ethan said. I'm asking because I want to know, Lily said plainly. Sloane looked at her for a moment. I don't know yet, she said. I have a lot of things I have to do. Important things. It might be a while. But you might, Lily said. Yeah, Sloane said. I might. Lily seemed to accept this with the philosophical practicality she applied to most things. Then she got up and hugged Sloane around the middle, briefly and without ceremony, the way she hugged Ethan when she was passing through a room and felt like it. Sloane stood very still for a moment, and then her arm came down around Lily's shoulders, and she looked, in that second, like someone who'd forgotten what that felt like and had just been reminded. Outside, Daniel had the SUV running. Ethan walked her to the end of the drive. They stood in the cold morning air and he could see the mountain in the morning sun, the snow brilliant and indifferent on the high ridges, the same mountain he'd lived under for 4 years now. Whatever you find, he said, I want to know. I know, she said. You'll know. She looked at him for a moment, and there was a lot in the look that neither of them named. Thank you. For Lily's socks, and the eggs with too much pepper, and all the rest of it. The pepper is fine, he said. The pepper, she said, is a lot. She got in the SUV, and it pulled carefully down the mountain road, and he stood at the end of his driveway and watched it go. And then he went back inside to where Lily was finishing her breakfast, and he sat down across from her, and neither of them said anything for a while. She's going to fix something bad, Lily said, eventually. Yeah, he said. I think she is. Is it about Mom? He looked at his daughter across the table. She looked back at him with her mother's eyes, calm and dark and patient, waiting without pressure. Yeah, he said. It might be. Lily nodded slowly, the way she nodded when she'd suspected something and it had been confirmed, and she looked down at her cereal and took another bite, and the cabin was quiet around them, and the mountain sat where it had always sat, neither friendly nor hostile, just there, holding whatever it held. 3 weeks after the SUV disappeared down his mountain road, Ethan received a package. No return address on the outer envelope, but the postmark was Seattle, and inside was a USB drive and a single sheet of paper with 4 words in Sloane's handwriting. You should know this. He plugged the drive into the old laptop he kept on the desk in the corner, the one Lily used for her schoolwork, the one that had accumulated a thin film of crackers dust on the keyboard from years of homework snacks, and he read for 2 hours without stopping. What Sloane had put on the drive was not a summary. It was the full architecture of a cover-up that had apparently been maintained quietly and efficiently for 11 years. Engineering reports, internal emails with subject lines that were bland and administrative, and contents that were anything but. A chain of executive approvals for the deferral of the original GX7 safety report, signed by 4 people, routed through 2 departments and buried in a capital expenditure review file where it would only be found by someone who was specifically looking for it. Actuarial assessments of liability exposure if the flaw was disclosed versus if it was not. A legal memo, unsigned but formatted on company letterhead, that laid out the financial argument for silence in language so careful and bloodless it took a full paragraph to understand that it was recommending they let people die rather than absorb the cost of a recall. He sat back in the chair when he got to the legal memo. He sat back and he looked at the ceiling and he breathed through it. Outside, Lily was in the yard with the neighbor's dog, a large friendly animal that belonged to a retired couple 6 miles down the road and had apparently decided to adopt them incrementally over the past year. He could hear her talking to it in the patient, instructional tone she used when she was teaching it things it probably couldn't learn. He sat in the chair and listened to his daughter's voice and breathed and let the anger settle into something he could work with. Because anger without direction was just noise. He'd learned that the hard way, in the years after Claire died, when the grief had moved through all its stages and arrived eventually at a fury with no specific address. At the weather, at the aircraft, at himself. And the fury had been the most destructive thing of all, not because it was wrong, but because it had nowhere to go. This was different. This fury had an address. It had names on it. It had dates and signatures and carbon copy recipients. He read through the files a second time, more slowly, and he made notes on the legal pad he kept beside the laptop, the one Lily usually covered in drawings when she was supposed to be doing math. The notes were specific and organized and operational, the way all his notes had always been. Then he picked up his phone and called Sloane. She answered on the second ring. You read it, she said. Yeah. All of it. Both times. A pause. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know how to prepare you for it. I thought you'd rather have it all than a version. You were right. He looked at the name on the legal memo, the one in the upper right corner, the department head who had commissioned it. This is your CFO's signature on the deferral order. Former CFO. He retired the same year my father did. Where is he now? Scottsdale. Plays golf. Has a very large house. Her voice had a quality he hadn't heard in it before. Not anger exactly, but the cold cousin of it, the version that had already moved past the emotional part and into what came next. I have my legal team building the full evidentiary file right now. I'm not going to make a move until it's complete because I want it done in a way that can't be walked back. How long? Another 2 weeks? Maybe 3. And in the meantime? In the meantime, she said, I've grounded all 12 remaining GX-7 aircraft. The board emergency meeting was... She paused. It was as bad as I expected. 2 board members resigned effective immediately. One of them called me personally afterward to explain that I was making a catastrophic business decision, and I let him explain it completely, and then I told him that 5 families would probably see it differently, and he hung up. Good, Ethan said. My father called too, she said. He waited. He says he didn't know, she said. He says the CFO handled the technical compliance decisions and that he trusted him and that he never saw the original report. Another pause, longer this time. I don't know if that's true. I genuinely don't know. Part of me believes him because I know how he ran the company. He was a big vision person. He hired people to manage the details, and it's possible the details were managed in ways he was insulated from. Part of me thinks that not knowing, for a man in his position, is its own kind of failure. Yeah, Ethan said. It is. I know. Her voice was quiet, without defense. I know. He looked at the legal pad, at the notes, at Claire's name in the margin where he'd written it without meaning to, just the habit of her name surfacing when the world required her to be relevant to something. Sloan, he said. Thank you for this. Don't thank me yet. Nothing's been fixed yet. I know, he said. But you could have buried it. It would have been very easy to bury it. No, she said. It actually wouldn't have been. He heard something in that, something honest and fundamental about who she was, and he filed it away in the place where he kept the things that mattered. I'll call you when the legal team is ready to move, she said. I may need you to provide a statement about Claire's crash, what you were told, the original investigation. Would you do that? Yes, he said. Okay. A brief pause. How's Lily? Teaching the neighbor's dog calculus, he said. Is it working? Hard to say. She's very committed. He heard something that might have been a laugh, brief and real, and then she said goodbye and the line went quiet. He sat at the desk a while longer, the USB drive in his hand, turning it over between his fingers. Outside, Lily had apparently moved on from calculus to something more physical. He could hear her running and the dog's enthusiastic accompaniment. He thought about Claire, not the grief version, not the guilt version, just her, actual, the way she'd looked at the kitchen table in the morning before she was fully awake, when her hair was wrong and she was searching for her coffee mug in the slow, methodical way of someone whose brain hadn't loaded yet. He thought about how she would have handled this, the revelation that her death wasn't what he'd believed it was for 3 years, that the fault wasn't his, that it wasn't the pilot's. She would have been furious on behalf of the pilot. That's where she would have gone first, not to her own situation, but to the 29-year-old man whose reputation had been posthumously destroyed to protect a software budget line. That's what she would have been furious about. He set the USB drive on the desk and went outside to find his daughter. Ticked. The call came 18 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, when the sky was doing the February thing where it couldn't decide between snow and sleet and was trying both. He was on the roof clearing ice from the drainage channel, a job that Lily had pointed out was more dangerous than it looked, with the flat assessment of someone who had recently studied physics, when his phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He came down the ladder and answered it. It was not Sloane's number. Mr. Cole. A man's voice, older, the particular cadence of someone who had spent decades speaking in professional settings. My name is Richard Hale. I'm the Chief Legal Officer at Whitmore Aviation. Ms. Whitmore asked me to contact you directly. All right, Ethan said. We're filing with the NTSB and the FAA on Monday, Hale said. The full disclosure package. We're also filing simultaneous civil notifications to the families of the 5 confirmed incident victims. Ms. Whitmore wanted you to know before it becomes public and to know that your wife's crash is included in the disclosure. Ethan sat down on the bottom rung of the ladder. The pilot, he said, James Reedy, the one whose certificate was flagged. His file will be included with a formal notation that the attribution of pilot error was made without full information and that the company's position is that the finding was incorrect. That's not the same as clearing his name. No, Hale said. It's not, but it is the beginning of the process by which that can happen. The NTSB will reopen the investigation. Miss Whitmore has already been in contact with Reedy's daughter. She's 21 now, living in Portland. Miss Whitmore spoke to her personally. Ethan thought about a 21-year-old girl who'd grown up with a father whose name had a flag on it. He thought about 11-year-old Lily. Okay, he said. We'll need your cooperation with the NTSB investigation, Hale said. Your account of what you were told, the original investigation findings, communications you may have received. I saved everything, Ethan said. Every document, every letter. A pause. That's very helpful, Mr. Cole. I saved everything, he said again, because something always felt wrong about it. He ended the call and sat on the bottom rung of the ladder with the sleet coming down around him, half snow and half something harder, tapping against his jacket and the top of his head, and he let himself have it. Not the grief, not the guilt, but the specific and complicated release of something he'd been carrying for 3 years finally beginning to lift. Not gone, not finished, but lighter, in the way that things are lighter when they're finally in motion, when they're finally being addressed by the world instead of just sitting inside you with nowhere to go. He was still sitting there when Lily appeared at the back door. Dad, you're getting wet. I know. Why are you sitting on the ladder? Got a phone call. She came out in her socks, which was a choice he was going to have thoughts about in approximately 30 seconds, and stood in front of him with her hands on her hips, assessing. Good call or bad call, she said. He looked at her. 7 years old and already the person in the room who cut to what mattered. Good, he said. I think good. She studied him for another moment with those eyes. You look like you're figuring out how to feel about it. Yeah, he said. I am. She held out her hand, the small, serious gesture of a kid who had learned that sometimes what a person needed was someone standing next to them. He took it, and they went inside, and he closed the door on the sleet. The story broke publicly on a Wednesday. He found out not from the news, but from Sloan, who called him at 7 a.m. before the press cycle got fully into motion, which he appreciated. It's out, she said. The full filing went to the agencies this morning. We issued a press statement simultaneously. I'm doing a press conference at 10. How do you feel? He asked. Terrified, she said, and the honesty of it, the lack of any professional buffer around it, hit him in a way he hadn't expected. But that's the right kind of terrified, the kind where you know you're doing the right thing, and the cost is real, and you're doing it anyway. Yeah, he said, that kind. He watched the press conference on Lily's laptop, perched on the kitchen counter while Lily ate breakfast and periodically looked up to evaluate Sloan with the detached, critical eye of someone encountering a person they'd formed their own opinion of independent of media presentation. Sloan stood at a podium in a room Ethan didn't recognize, some corporate conference room, polished and impersonal in the way those rooms always were, and she looked different than she had in his kitchen. Not worse, just different. The professional version, the one that had been in the board meetings and the investor calls. But she spoke without a prepared statement in front of her, which he noticed, and the words came in the particular way that words come when they're actually from the person saying them, rather than from a communications team. Whitmore Aviation acknowledges that a safety flaw in the GX7 navigation system was identified by our own engineering team 11 years ago, she said, and that the decision was made at the executive level to defer action on that finding. That decision was wrong. The people who made it were wrong, and the consequences of that decision were paid for by people who never should have paid for it. She paused. I became CEO of this company 4 years ago, and I have spent those 4 years learning things about it that I'm still processing. The appropriate response to what I've learned is not to manage it or to contain it. The appropriate response is to fix it. A reporter said something about share price. I'm not talking about share price today, Sloan said. A different reporter, something about the board resignations. I'm talking about 5 crashes and the families who were lied to about why they happened, she said. I'm happy to take other questions when we're done with that one. Lily, from across the table, said, "She's good at that." "At what?" "Not letting people move her off the thing she's talking about." "Yeah," Ethan said. "She is." The press conference ran 45 minutes. Afterward, he sat with the closed laptop in front of him and felt the strange, disorienting quality of a thing you'd believed about your own life being publicly reclassified. Claire's crash, his guilt, 3 years of a story he'd been telling himself. It was all the same set of facts, but the meaning of them had shifted irreversibly. He wasn't the man who'd failed to be there. He was the man who'd been lied to by a company that had chosen its margins over its passengers. And the difference between those two things was enormous. He was still sitting there when his phone rang again. Different number. Area code he didn't immediately recognize. "Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice, young. "This is Nadia Reedy. James Reedy was my father." He straightened in the chair. "I know who your father was," he said. "Miss Whitmore gave me your number," she said. "I hope that's okay. She said you were one of the families, and I just wanted to talk to someone who understood what this was. My friends are wonderful, but they don't understand why this matters so much, and I keep trying to explain, and—" She stopped. He could hear that she was working to hold her voice level. He was a good pilot. He was a really, really good pilot, and they put his name on something that wasn't his fault, and I've been carrying that for 10 years, and now it has somewhere to go, Ethan said. A pause. "Yeah," she said. "That's exactly it." They talked for 40 minutes. He did most of the listening. He'd learned a long time ago that listening was its own form of competence, not a passive state but an active one, and he brought to it the same quality of attention he'd once brought to fieldwork. Fully present, tracking everything, not waiting for a gap to put himself into. Nadia Reedy was 21 and angry and smart, and trying to figure out how to grieve something that had been denied resolution for as long as she'd understood it was happening. He told her some things about Claire. He told her about Lily. He told her about the 3 years before Sloane's helicopter went down on his mountain, and she laughed once, surprised, genuine, when he described Lily's assessment of him sitting on the ladder in the sleet. "She sounds amazing," Nadia said. "She's going to be formidable," he said. "She already is," Nadia said. "She clearly runs your house." "Accurate," he said. When they hung up, he felt wrung out in the way that was actually clean, like a cloth that had been carrying something that finally got washed through. That evening, his phone buzzed with a text from Sloane. Not a call. A text, which he'd come to understand was her shorthand for things that weren't urgent but were real. Press conference done. Board is furious. Stock dropped 11% by close. Legal team says the disclosure process will take 18 months minimum. "I'm told I may not survive the next board vote." He typed back, "You knew all of that before Monday." A pause, then, "Yes." He typed, "How are you actually?" Another pause, longer. "I stood in the elevator afterward and my hands were shaking. First time my hands have shaken in a professional context in I don't know how many years. I didn't know what to do with it." He thought for a moment, then typed, "That's the right kind of terrified." He saw the small indicator that she'd read it. Then nothing for a moment, then, "Yeah, I know." He set the phone down and went to start dinner, and halfway through it, Lily came and stood beside him at the stove the way she did sometimes, not helping, just being there, close enough to bump shoulders with when she shifted her weight. "You seem different," she said. "Different how?" She thought about it. "Less like you're carrying something." He looked down at her. "Working on it," he said. She nodded, bumped his shoulder, and went to set the table. Sloane came back to the mountain 6 weeks after the press conference. She came alone this time. No Daniel, no assistant on the phone. In a rental car she'd apparently driven herself from the airport, which he knew because she texted him 30 minutes out with the message, "I think I went the wrong way on the county road. Is the turnoff before or after the rock that looks like a dog?" He texted back, "After. Slow down. It's icy." She pulled up just before noon, got out of the car looking like someone who had spent 6 weeks in the professional equivalent of hand-to-hand combat and had come through it upright but tired, and she stood beside the car for a moment just looking at the mountain and the cabin and the tree line. And he watched her from the porch and understood that she'd needed this the way some people needed a specific kind of quiet that their regular life didn't provide. Lily heard the car and appeared in the doorway behind him. "She came back," Lily said. "Yeah," he said. "I knew she would," Lily said, and went back inside with the equanimity of someone who had already processed this possibility and found it satisfactory. Sloane came up to the porch, and she looked at him, and he looked at her, and there was too much between them to address all of it at once, so neither of them tried. "You look terrible," he said. "Thank you," she said. "Boards of directors will do that to you." "You survived the vote?" "Barely. 4-3. She rubbed the side of her face, a gesture that was nothing like the composed professional version of her, something purely tired in it. "The 3 who voted against me are people who were in those rooms 11 years ago. They can't fire me for exposing the truth, so they voted against my compensation restructuring proposal instead, which is technically a different thing, and also clearly the same thing. What are you going to do about them?" "Keep going," she said. "What else do you do?" He opened the door. "Come in." Lily made lunch. She looked at him. "Lily made lunch?" "She's been practicing," he said. "Manage your expectations." "Is it edible?" "Define edible." She laughed. Not the composed, managed version, the real one, the lopsided one, the one he'd first seen across his kitchen table on the morning after the crash, and he felt something in him that he hadn't felt for 3 years, something that wasn't grief or guilt or the particular texture of carrying a weight so long you'd forgotten what not carrying it felt like. Inside, Lily had made sandwiches with a structural ambition that somewhat outpaced their execution. They were extremely tall, improbably stacked, and appeared to involve at least 4 ingredients that didn't fully cohere. "I made yours with extra pepper," Lily told Sloane. "Because Dad always puts too much pepper on everything, so I thought maybe you were used to it." Sloane sat down at the table and looked at the sandwich. "That's very thoughtful," she said. "That's genuinely the most thoughtful thing." "You don't have to eat the whole thing," Lily said. "The middle is the best part. The top is too much." "I'm going to eat the whole thing," Sloane said. Lily looked pleased. They ate lunch, the 3 of them, at the kitchen table in the flat winter light, and the conversation moved through small things. Lily's school, a book she was reading, a crow that had been appearing at the kitchen window for 2 weeks, and that Lily had named Reginald and was attempting to befriend with strategic bread placement. Sloane listened to all of it with the particular quality of attention she had that made whoever was talking feel like the room had organized itself around them. It was only afterward, when Lily went to check on Reginald's progress, that they sat across from each other in the quiet and talked about the real things. "The NTSB reopened James Reedy's investigation," Sloane said. "Formally, last week. The preliminary review supports our position. The GX7 flaw was a contributing factor, and the original determination of pilot error was made without the relevant system data." Ethan's hands were flat on the table. "How long until they reach a conclusion?" "Months. But the direction is clear." She paused. "I spoke to Nadia Reedy again. I've been checking in on her every 2 weeks. She seems..." She thought about the word. "She seems like someone who is processing something very large with not enough support structure around it. I've made sure she has access to legal representation for the civil case. I'm also covering her father's pension, what he would have been owed if his certificate hadn't been flagged. My legal team says it's a liability issue to do that before the case closes, but I'm doing it anyway." "Your legal team says a lot of things you do anyway," he said. "Yes," she said. "That's become a pattern." He was quiet for a moment. "What about Claire's case?" "It'll be included in the NTSB review. The original investigation will be formally revisited. The cause will be reclassified." She looked at him directly. "You'll stop being the man who wasn't there when it happened and start being the man whose wife died because a company chose not to fix something they knew was broken." He absorbed that. "Those 2 things," he said, "feel very different." "I know," she said. "One of them I can be angry about," he said. "The other one I could only be ashamed of, and I've been living in the ashamed version for 3 years." She didn't offer him anything easy. She didn't tell him he shouldn't have felt that way, or that it made sense he had, or any of the things that would have been true but would have missed the point. She just looked at him with the directness she always had, steady and without flinching. "I know," she said again. Outside, they could hear Lily talking to the crow, whose willingness to be befriended remained, from the sounds of it, incomplete. "She's going to figure out that crow eventually," Sloane said. "She figures most things out eventually," Ethan said. "She gets that from somewhere." He looked across the table at Sloane, at the tiredness in her that wasn't weakness, at the specific quality of someone who had walked into something very difficult and kept walking. And he thought about the night of the crash, the way she'd had her hand against the door of the burning helicopter and had still been trying to think through what to do next. "You should stay for dinner," he said. "I was hoping you'd say that," she said. "I make everything with too much pepper." "I know," she said. "I've been thinking about those eggs for 6 weeks." He looked at her. "Really?" she said, deadpan. "The eggs were excellent. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Lily tells me every time." "Lily is wrong," Sloane said. "Or she's right and it doesn't matter. Some things don't need to be perfect to be exactly what you needed." He wasn't sure she was only talking about the eggs. The afternoon light was moving across the kitchen floor at its long winter angle, and the mountain was doing the thing it did on clear days when the sun was low, turning the snow on the high ridges a color that wasn't quite gold and wasn't quite orange, something in between that didn't have a good name, that you just had to see and know that you were seeing something that was only available for about 20 minutes a day and only in certain conditions. And if you happened to be in the right place at the right time, you got it. And if you didn't, you just had to wait for the next day and hope the conditions were right again. Ethan sat at his kitchen table across from Sloane Whitmore, who had crashed on his mountain and turned his understanding of the last 3 years inside out, and he watched the light move across the floor, and he felt for the first time in a very long time like a man who was in the right place. She stayed 4 days that second visit, not by plan, or not by any plan either of them named out loud. The first day became the second because the weather rolled back in, and the county road got bad enough that leaving felt like a poor decision, which was true and also convenient, and neither of them examined the convenience too closely. The second became the third because Lily asked, with her characteristic directness, whether Sloane could stay to help with the history project she was building about the Pacific Northwest, and Sloane said yes before Ethan could offer her an exit. And Lily looked satisfied in the way she looked when something she'd anticipated had arrived on schedule. The third day they didn't discuss at all. It just happened. Ethan watched her settle into the rhythms of the cabin with the careful attention of a man who'd spent years reading environments and the people inside them. She woke early, like him. He'd come downstairs the second morning to find her already at the kitchen table with coffee, laptop open, working through what appeared to be legal correspondence. Her hair still loose, still wearing the borrowed flannel she'd commandeered on her first visit and apparently claimed permanent custody of. She worked until Lily appeared, then she put the laptop away. He noted that. The full pivot, no half attention, no glancing at the screen. She was good with Lily in a way that wasn't performed. She didn't talk to her like a small adult or like a child who needed managing. She talked to her like a person she was genuinely interested in, which Lily, having a finely calibrated sense for authenticity, responded to with her whole self. On the third afternoon, the two of them were at the kitchen table with Lily's history project spread between them. Maps, printouts, a truly ambitious hand-drawn timeline that covered most of the table's surface. And Ethan was in the living room pretending to read and actually watching them through the doorway. And the thing he felt observing them was something he hadn't felt in a long time, something quiet and very specific. The feeling of a house with the right number of people in it. He went back to his book before either of them noticed. The fourth morning was clear and cold, and Sloane had a flight out of the regional airport at 2 p.m, and they both knew it, and neither of them brought it up until it was time. She packed the same way she had the first time, efficiently, without ceremony, and Lily gave her another one of her brief, serious hugs, the kind that didn't require supplemental words. At the end of the drive, it was different from the first time. The first time there had been too much unresolved between them for the goodbye to be clean. This time there was still too much unresolved, but it was a different kind. Not the weight of unknown things, but the weight of known things that didn't yet have the right shape. "I'll call you when the NTSB preliminary comes through," she said. "Okay," he said. She looked at him for a moment with the honest, unmanaged version of her face. And maybe when it doesn't, she said. Yeah, he said. That too. She got in the car. He stood at the end of the drive until the rental disappeared around the first bend, and then he stood there a moment longer, because sometimes you needed a moment between what a thing was and what came next. The call he wasn't expecting came on a Thursday evening 7 weeks later. It wasn't from Sloane's number, and it wasn't Hale's number, and it wasn't Nadia Righty. It was the Cascade County Emergency Dispatch number, which he knew because he had saved it the first winter up here as basic operational sense. Mr. Cole, this is Dispatch Coordinator Rahi. I'm calling because we have a rescue situation developing and your name came up as a former SAR qualified responder in this zone. I understand if you're not... What's the situation? He said. A brief pause. The kind where someone recalibrated their prepared speech because they'd expected more resistance. Test flight. Whitmore Aviation Developmental Aircraft. New navigation suite prototype. Went down approximately 40 minutes ago in the high ridge line above Sutter Creek. Pilot's name is Devlin Torres, 26 years old. Transponder is active. We have a position. The problem is the weather window. Ethan was already moving toward the gear closet. What's the window? Storm system coming in from the northwest, fast. We've got maybe 90 minutes before the upper elevation becomes unworkable. Professional rescue teams are 40 minutes out from staging, which puts them at the site with maybe 20 minutes of viable work time before they'd have to pull back. The aircraft has known stability issues in this storm profile. They're weighing whether to go or hold until the storm passes. How long does the storm hold? Current projection is 14 to 18 hours. He pulled the gear closet open. What's the pilot's status? Transponder active. Emergency beacon active. We have no voice contact. That's either a radio issue or... I understand, he said. What's the access route? Ree gave him the coordinates. He cross-referenced them against the terrain map he kept pinned to the inside of the closet door. Old habit, updated every season. And found the position in about 4 seconds. There's a route from the Sutter Creek Fire Road, he said. Cuts the approach by half. The professional team will come in from the highway side. We know about the fire road, Ree said. It's narrow, potentially iced over. I know the fire road, Ethan said. I've run it in worse. I can be at the site before the professional team stages. A pause. Mr. Cole, I want to be clear that I'm not asking you to... I know, he said. I'll call you when I'm en route. He ended the call and turned around and found Lily standing in the hallway with her arms crossed and her expression already set to the particular configuration she deployed when she'd heard something she didn't like and was deciding how to feel about it. No, he said preemptively. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was going to ask who it was, she said with dignity. Dispatch. There's a downed aircraft on the Sutter Creek ridgeline. Pilot needs help. Lily was quiet for a moment. How bad is the weather going to be? Bad, he said. I'll be back. You said that last time. I was right last time. She looked at him for a long time. That assessment, those eyes, her mother's eyes making their judgment. And then she unfolded her arms. I'm calling Mrs. Farrow, she said. I'm not staying here by myself. That's a good call, he said. He was out the door in 6 minutes. He was at the Fire Road turnoff in 22 minutes, the truck's four-wheel drive earning its existence on the iced-over grade. And he'd been climbing on foot for 15 minutes when his phone buzzed with Sloane's number. He answered it without breaking stride. I know, she said immediately. Dispatch called me. It's one of our developmental aircraft, Ethan. It's our test pilot on our aircraft, and I'm... He could hear something in her voice that was movement, the particular background noise of someone already in transit. I'm 20 minutes from the regional airport. I can get a helicopter. Sloane, he said. The storm window. I know the storm window. I'm already on the ridgeline. A pause. Of course you are. She breathed out. Of course. Okay, I'm coming up regardless. I'll get as close as the weather allows. Be careful, he said. You be careful, she said. You're the one on the mountain. This is my mountain, he said. I know, she said. That's why I'm scared. He put the phone away and kept climbing. The conditions at the upper elevation were bad and getting worse. The leading edge of the storm system was already producing ground-level wind gusts, and the temperature had dropped 8 degrees since the trailhead. His headlamp cut about 12 feet into the blowing snow, and he navigated the rest by compass bearing and the terrain knowledge that after 4 winters on this mountain had become something close to instinct. He reached the site 37 minutes after leaving the truck. The aircraft was a prototype helicopter, smaller than the standard commercial models, built low and angular with the particular aesthetic of something designed in a wind tunnel. It had come down hard on a sloped shelf of rock and snow about 200 meters below the true ridgeline, and it had tumbled. He could see the scrape marks across the rock face, the path of the impact. The fuselage was intact but canted at a severe angle. The port skid collapsed, the rotors gone. No fire. The cold was a factor in that. Fuel in these temperatures didn't ignite as readily, and he was grateful for it. He got to the door in 40 seconds. Devlin Torres was inside, conscious, which was the first good thing. He was 26 according to dispatch, and he looked about 19 right now, with the specific look of a young man who had just lived through something he hadn't fully processed yet. Left leg was clearly wrong. The way it was angled against the collapsed instrument console told Ethan that something structural had happened, tibia probably, possibly the knee. Head laceration, blood on the collar of his flight suit, dried enough that it wasn't current. Right hand was gripping the doorframe with the mechanical persistence of someone whose body hadn't gotten the message yet that they'd stopped falling. "Torres," Ethan said. The young man's eyes focused. "Yeah," he said. His voice was rougher than it should have been, and Ethan tracked that, possibly smoke inhalation from whatever electrical burn had preceded the crash, possibly just the sustained adrenaline working its way out. "Yeah, Who are you?" "Ethan Cole. I'm going to get you out. Tell me where you're hurt." "Leg," Torres said. "Left leg, yeah. And I think my shoulder, right shoulder, when I braced." He paused. "How bad is the storm?" "Bad," Ethan said. "We're not staying long. Can you move your left foot?" A pause, a tentative attempt. "No," Torres said. "Not really." "Okay, I'm going to stabilize it, and then we're going to move. This is going to hurt." "I know," Torres said. He had the flat acceptance of someone who'd already done the math on his situation and arrived at an unpleasant answer. Is there anyone else coming?" "Professional team is 20 minutes behind me," Ethan said, already pulling the trauma kit. "But we may not have 20 minutes, so we're going to start moving and they'll meet us on the way down." He worked fast, stabilized the leg with the inflatable splint from the pack, got Torres's right arm over his shoulder, assessed the route down with his headlamp in the brief moments the wind dropped enough to see. The shelf they were on was accessible, but the path below it had iced over in the time since he'd climbed it, which was going to make the descent with a compromised patient significantly more interesting than the ascent. "Can you put any weight on the right leg?" Ethan asked. "Some, not a lot." "That's enough. Let's go." They were 20 meters below the aircraft when the storm made its decision. The wind had been gusting intermittently, but there was a difference between a storm's edge and its body, and what arrived in the next 30 seconds was the body. A sustained wind that hit them from the northwest at what Ethan estimated at 50-plus miles an hour, carrying snow dense enough to reduce his headlamp to a glow against a white wall. The temperature dropping with the wind chill into ranges where exposed skin became a timeline rather than a comfort issue. Torres made a sound. "I've got you," Ethan said. "Lean into me, not away." Is this the storm?" "Yes." "We're not going to make it down in this," Torres said. It wasn't panic. It was a statement of what he was seeing. "We're not going to make it down the fast way," Ethan said. "There's a rock shelter about 80 meters west. Bivouac until the team arrives." "You know this mountain that well?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "I do." He found the shelter in the dark and the wind by a combination of compass bearing and the feeling he'd developed for this specific ridgeline over 4 winters, the particular way the rock formation sat, the direction the natural windbreaks ran, the way the terrain funneled and shaped the air moving through it. It wasn't luck. It was the accumulated product of years of deliberately learning a piece of ground, which was a thing he'd done without having a reason for it at the time, and now had a reason for. The shelter was not comfortable. It was a deep overhang of granite that cut the wind by about 70% and the snow by more, a space wide enough for two people to sit with their backs against the rock if they were willing to be close, which in 40 below wind chill they were. He got Torres down against the rock wall, draped the mylar blanket over both of them, and set a hand warmer between their joined layers. Torres was shaking, controlled, but shaking. "Talk to me," Ethan said. "Stay awake. Tell me something." "Like what?" "Anything. What made you want to fly?" Torres was quiet for a moment. The wind screamed at the shelf of rock above them, and the rock held. "My grandmother," he said. "She flew crop dusters in the Central Valley, like vintage stuff, 60-year-old aircraft. She was the only woman doing it in the county for 2 decades. A pause. "She used to say flying was the only place where what you put in is exactly what you get out. No politics, no luck, just skill and physics." "She sounds right," Ethan said. "She died last year." Torres's voice was steady, matter of fact. She would have thought this was hilarious. "Devlin, you crashed a $4 million prototype on a mountain because you trusted the computer over your own eyes." He paused. She would have had a point. "What happened up there?" Ethan asked. "Navigation suite gave me a false terrain clearance reading," Torres said. "I was higher than it said I was. When I corrected for what the system was showing me, I was actually dropping into the ridgeline." He was quiet. "New system, still in test. This is what tests are for." Ethan heard the echo of 11-year-old engineering reports, of actuarial memos about liability, of 5 crashes, and the families who'd been told the wrong thing about why. "The system flag it?" he asked. "No," Torres said. "No warning, just wrong data." Ethan filed that. Sloan would need to know. "How long have you been with Whitmore?" he asked. 8 months, Torres said. "I know what's been happening with the company, the disclosure, the groundings." He paused. "I almost quit when it came out. Felt like I was flying for a company that—" He stopped. "But then I read Ms. Whitmore's press conference. The whole thing, not just the clips. And I thought, she's actually trying to fix it. Someone's actually trying to fix it." Another pause. "And then my grandmother's voice in my head saying, 'Don't quit on a thing just because it's broken. You quit when it's not trying to be better.'" Ethan thought about that. "Your grandmother sounds like she knew things," he said. "She really, really did." His satcom buzzed. He pulled it out. "Sloan, I'm at staging. Storm's too heavy for air. Ground team is 20 minutes from your position. Are you okay?" He typed back with one hand, the other keeping the mylar in position. "Shelter. Both okay?" "Pilot conscious, leg injury. Send team west route along the Sutter Ridge, not the standard approach." "A minute, then." Relayed. 20 minutes. "Ethan." He waited. "Don't do anything else heroic until the team gets there." He typed, "I'm sitting under a rock." Then, "That's extremely heroic for you." He almost smiled. Torres, who had evidently been watching the screen from 6 inches away because there was nowhere else to look, said, "Is that someone who knows you?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "She seems to have your number," Torres said. "She does," he said. The 20 minutes the team took felt both much longer and much shorter than 20 minutes, the way time always compressed and expanded in field conditions. He kept Torres talking, about his grandmother, about the aircraft, about growing up in the Central Valley, about a dog he'd had as a kid that had, apparently, been the best dog in the history of dogs, a claim he was willing to defend at length. Ethan let him defend it, keeping him engaged, keeping him present, keeping his core temperature from making decisions that would complicate the extraction. When the headlamps of the rescue team appeared through the snow, Torres exhaled with his whole body. "Okay," he said. "Okay." "Yeah," Ethan said. The team lead was a woman named Garrett, who clearly knew her work. She assessed Torres in under 90 seconds, coordinated with her team with the efficient brevity of experienced people, and looked at Ethan with the particular expression of a professional encountering a civilian who'd done professional things. "You called the west route," she said. "Standard approach would have taken you over the ice shelf," he said. "It's worse than this morning." She looked at him for a beat. "SAR background?" "Navy," he said. Long time ago. She nodded once, the nod of someone filing something, and went back to her team. The descent took 40 minutes. Ethan stayed close to the litter carrying Torres, less because he was needed and more because he'd started the job and his instincts didn't process leaving it early well. At the base of the fire road, there were vehicles. The rescue team's truck, 2 county sheriff SUVs, and a rented SUV he recognized. Sloane was standing beside it. She was in gear that was better than her first visit, but still wrong for the elevation. Good boots this time, at least, and a serious jacket. And when she saw him come out of the tree line with the team, she did something he caught and she probably didn't intend anyone to see, which was to take one controlled breath and let it all the way out. He walked to her. Torres is okay, he said. Leg injury, shoulder, head laceration. He's going to be fine. I know, she said. Garrett called it in. She was looking at him with the composure back in place, but it was thinner than usual, worn down to something more immediate. You look cold. I'm fine. Your jacket is... There's ice on your jacket. That happens, he said. Sloane, the navigation system, she said. Whatever went wrong up there, I need to know everything Torres told you. I know, he said. I'll tell you everything, but not right now. She looked at him. Right now, he said, you need to go make sure your pilot has what he needs, and I need to stand here for a minute. She understood that. She was good at understanding things she hadn't been told explicitly, which was either a gift or a survival mechanism, and he suspected it was both. Okay, she said. She went to where the medical team was loading Torres, and Ethan stood at the edge of the tree line with the storm chewing at the ridgeline above him, and he breathed, and he let the debrief run. The thing his body did automatically after a field situation, cataloging what had happened, what had worked, what hadn't, what was owed to luck versus skill versus preparation. It was a habit he'd never been able to fully retire, and standing in the snow at the bottom of a mountain with a rescued pilot 40 feet away, he was grateful he hadn't. Torres was loaded and moving within 10 minutes. Sloane reappeared at his side. He told me about the navigation data, she said. The false terrain clearance. Is it the GX7 system? Ethan asked. No, it's a new suite. The developmental prototype they were testing specifically because they were supposed to be replacing the GX7's architecture. Her voice had the cold, specific quality he recognized as anger being held under careful management. If the replacement system has the same class of flaw, then you're not done, he said. No, she said. I'm not done. She was quiet for a moment, and he watched her process it. The additional weight, the longer road, the board that was already furious and was about to get worse. This is going to cost me the company, she said. It wasn't self-pity, just an accurate assessment stated without drama. If I ground the developmental program too, disclose a second system flaw. The board will call an emergency vote, and this time they'll have enough votes to remove me. Probably, he said. I'm going to do it anyway, she said. I know, he said. She looked at him. You knew before I said it. Yeah, he said. She looked back at the mountain, at the ridgeline that was disappearing now into the full body of the storm, and she had the look she got sometimes when she was carrying something heavier than she was going to describe. And he stood next to her in the cold and let her carry it without trying to take it from her. Torres told me about his grandmother, he said. He's talked about her before, Sloane said. She sounds formidable. She told him you don't quit on something that's still trying to be better, Ethan said. Sloane was quiet. Whitmore Aviation is trying, he said. Whether or not they keep you, that's what you've made it. She looked at him, and the composure did the thing it did sometimes, the slight fracture that let something real come through. That might be the most generous interpretation of my last 6 months that anyone has offered me, she said. I don't do generous interpretations, he said. I do accurate ones. She held his gaze for a moment, and there was something in it, something that had been building since the morning after the crash, through the kitchen table and the eggs and the files on the USB drive and the 18 days and the legal memos and the conversations in the dark and the phone calls and the flannel shirt she kept borrowing. Something that didn't have a name yet but was past the stage of needing to pretend it wasn't there. Come back to the cabin, he said. Tonight, Let the team handle the protocols. Come back and eat dinner. With too much pepper, she said. Correct. Lily's going to want to hear everything about the rescue. She's going to want to tell you about Reginald, he said. The crow is apparently making progress. She laughed, the real one, brief and unguarded. And the tension in her face shifted into something that was tired, but also lighter. The specific combination of a person who had been through a very hard day and was now somewhere they were glad to be. Okay, she said. Yeah, let's go. He drove her up the mountain road in his truck. Her rental left its staging to be handled in the morning. The heater ran loud and neither of them felt the need to fill the noise with anything, which was a kind of ease that didn't arrive between people who were still figuring out whether they trusted each other. It was the ease of people who already knew the answer to that question and had stopped needing to confirm it. Lily was at the window when they pulled up. He saw her face appear and then disappear, and when they came through the door, she was at the kitchen table with her history project as though she'd been sitting there all evening, which she had not. Hi, she said to Sloane with studied casualness. Hi, Sloane said. How's the pilot? He's going to be okay, Sloane said. He has a broken leg, but he's going to be okay. Lily nodded, satisfied. Then, Reginald took bread from my hand today, directly from my hand. Tell me everything, Sloane said, sitting down across from her. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway and watched his daughter explain the detailed diplomatic history of her relationship with a crow, and Sloane listening with her full attention, and the wood stove doing its work, and the storm outside running itself against the mountain the way storms had always done on this mountain, and the mountain holding the way it had always held, and the cabin full of light and voices, and the smell of dinner he should start making, and he stood there a moment longer than he needed to before he moved, because some things were worth the extra moment. He went to the stove and started dinner and added the pepper, and didn't reduce it, and didn't apologize for it, and from the table he heard Sloane say something that made Lily burst out laughing. The full, unrestrained laugh of a 7-year-old who found something genuinely funny, and the sound of it moved through the cabin and settled into all the places where the quiet had been too heavy for too long. The board voted to remove her on a Tuesday. Sloane found out at 6:47 in the morning, Pacific time, from a text message sent by Richard Hale that said simply, 5-2. I'm sorry, Sloane. She was in a Seattle hotel room, had been for 3 days handling the aftermath of the Torres crash and the disclosure of the second navigation system flaw, and she sat on the edge of the bed in the gray early light and read the message twice and then set the phone face down on the mattress and sat there for a while without moving. She'd known it was coming. She'd known it since the night at the cabin, when she'd said it out loud to Ethan, and he'd said probably, and she'd said she was going to do it anyway. Knowing something is coming and having it arrive are two different experiences, and the gap between them is where the actual wait lives. She showered, she dressed, she ordered coffee from room service and sat at the small desk by the window and looked out at the city still running its early morning routines below. And she made a list, not on the laptop, on paper, the yellow legal pad she'd started carrying because Ethan kept one on his desk, and she'd borrowed it once during the second visit and never fully gone back to typing her real thoughts. The list was not a crisis plan. It was not a strategy document. It was the list of things she had done in the 14 weeks since she'd walked out of a burning helicopter on a mountain in the Cascades, and she wrote them in the plain, flat language of someone taking inventory. Grounded 12 GX-7 aircraft. Disclosed 5 crashes to the NTSB and FAA. Ensured James Reedy's investigation was reopened. Called Nadia Reedy personally before the press conference. Covered Reedy's pension out of her own funds. Contacted every family affected by the 5 confirmed incidents and given them direct access to legal resources at the company's expense. Disclosed the second navigation system flaw from the Torres crash immediately without waiting to assess the political fallout. Sat in 5 board meetings and 3 investor calls and 1 shareholder emergency session and said the same thing every time in different words. The right thing costs something and we're going to pay it. She looked at the list. She had not saved the company. She had possibly destroyed it, or at least the version of it that had existed for the past 11 years. The profitable, growing, carefully managed version built on the foundation of a deferred engineering report and a legal memo that had decided human lives were a liability calculation. But she had done the things on the list. She folded the paper and put it in her jacket pocket and called Ethan. He answered on the first ring, which meant he'd been awake, which she'd expected. "I heard," he said. "Hale called you?" "No, Nadia Reedy called me. She saw it on the news." Sloan absorbed that. Nadia Reedy had been following the board's situation closely enough to call Ethan about it at 7 in the morning, which meant she cared about Sloan's outcome, which meant the work Sloan had done with her had become something mutual rather than just remedial. That mattered. She filed it in the place where things that mattered went. "How are you?" Ethan asked. "I've been better," she said. "I've also been worse. The helicopter was worse." "Yeah," he said. "Different kind of bad. This kind leaves you standing," she said. "Which is something." She heard him move. The particular sound of him shifting in the chair by the window, the one he used when he was thinking and didn't want to pace. "What happens now with the company?" he asked. "The board will appoint an interim CEO from inside the existing executive structure," she said. "My guess is Davies. He's been positioning for it since the first board meeting after the disclosure. He'll spend the first 90 days trying to stabilize the share price and manage the legal exposure." She paused. "What he won't be able to do is undo what I've already done. The NTSB disclosures are on record. The families have lawyers, the engineering reports are public. The cover-up is documented." She looked at the city below the window. "I may be gone, but the thing I built isn't going anywhere." "You're sure about that?" he said. "The truth doesn't have an undo button," she said. "That's the one thing I'm sure about." A quiet moment on the line. "Come back up," he said. She closed her eyes briefly. "Ethan, not to hide," he said. "Not to sit around. Just come back up. Lily's been asking about you every day for 2 weeks, and I've been running out of non-committal answers." "What have you been telling her?" "That you're busy fixing things," he said. She said that's what people say when they don't know when someone's coming back. Sloan almost smiled. "She's not wrong." "No," he said. "She usually isn't." "I'll be there by tonight," she said. She checked out of the hotel at 9, drove to the airport, and sat in the small regional terminal waiting for the afternoon flight north with the legal pad in her lap, not writing anything, just holding it. The particular comfort of an object that had absorbed something real. The NTSB issued its preliminary findings on James Reedy's case 11 days after Sloan was removed from the board. Ethan read the official document on Lily's laptop at the kitchen table, alone, on a Thursday morning when Lily was at school and Sloan was in the spare room she'd been using since she came back, on a call with Hale about the ongoing legal process. He read it twice, the way he'd read everything connected to this, carefully, completely, without skipping to the conclusion before the evidence. The preliminary finding was clear. The GX7 navigation system had produced incorrect terrain data during the final approach. The pilot, James Reedy, had responded to the data the system gave him, which was the correct response to incorrect information. The original determination of pilot error was formally designated as unsupported by the available evidence, pending the full investigation review. The NTSB recommended that the original finding be vacated. Ethan sat with the document open on the screen in front of him. He'd spent 3 years with a version of James Reedy in his head, a face he'd never seen, a name attached to a file, a man whose last minutes he'd reconstructed from the accident report in the particular way you reconstructed things you couldn't stop yourself from thinking about. In the version he'd carried, Reedy had made a mistake, had descended too fast, had misjudged, had done something that a different pilot might have done differently and survived. That version had given Ethan's grief somewhere to land that wasn't entirely his own chest, which was the function that blame served. It provided architecture for a feeling that had no natural structure. The version in the document in front of him was different. Reedy had done everything right. He had followed the instruments, trusted the system, corrected for the data he was given, and the data had been wrong because a company had decided the cost of fixing it was higher than the cost of the risk. Reedy had been competent and careful and 29 years old, and he had died because someone in a conference room had looked at an actuarial table. Ethan closed the laptop. He sat in the kitchen for a while with just the sound of the wood stove and the wind at the eaves and the particular silence of a house during the school hours, and he let himself feel the full shape of it. Not the managed version, not the version he'd been carrying for 3 years like a load distributed across his whole body so that no single point felt its full weight, but the actual shape, which was grief and anger, and something underneath both of those that he could only describe as the exhaustion of having been wrong about something important for a very long time. He heard Sloane's call end in the other room. A minute later, she appeared in the kitchen doorway, and she looked at his face, and she didn't say anything. Just came in and sat across from him at the table and waited. "They're vacating the pilot error finding," he said. "I know," she said. "Hale just told me." "His name gets cleared," Ethan said. "Yes." "His daughter gets to stop carrying that." "Yes," she said. Quiet, steady, not trying to make it smaller or larger than it was. "And Claire." He stopped, organized himself. "Claire's crash will get the same review, same standard. They'll look at the data from the black box with the GX7 analysis, and they'll reach the same conclusion." "They will," Sloane said. "Hale says 3 to 4 months for the full review, but the direction is established." He looked at his hands on the table. "I spent 3 years thinking I should have been there," he said. "That if I hadn't left the service, if I'd been the one flying her, if I'd been there in some different version of the day, she'd have been okay." He paused. It turns out that's not what the day was. The day was a system failing. The day was a decision made 11 years ago in a building she never walked into by people who never knew her name. "Yes," Sloane said. "That's what the day was." "I don't know how to grieve that version," he said. "I had the other version for 3 years. I knew how to carry that one." She was quiet for a moment. "I think you grieve it the same way," she said. "You just stop grieving alone." He looked at her. She held his gaze without flinching, without the professional composure or the managed version or the CEO who'd walked into his kitchen 12 weeks ago looking for the nearest exit from a burning helicopter. Just Sloane, across his kitchen table, telling him something true. "Yeah," he said, after a while. "Okay." He called Nadia Reedy that afternoon. She answered on the third ring, and he could tell from her voice she'd already seen the preliminary finding because her voice had the quality of someone who'd been crying and had stopped, but the evidence was still there. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Ethan," he said. "We've talked enough times now." "Ethan," she said. She breathed in. "Did you read it?" "Yeah," he said. "I read it." "He did everything right," she said. "He literally did everything right." "Yeah," he said. "He did." She was quiet for a moment, and he let the quiet be there without filling it, because some things needed room. "I've been angry at him," she said. "That's the part I didn't tell Ms. Whitmore, or you, or anyone. I've been angry at him for 10 years because they said he made a mistake, and I thought he left us because he wasn't careful enough, and I've been carrying that too on top of everything else, and now—" She stopped. "Now I don't have that anymore." Which sounds like it should feel better, and it mostly does, but also it's a different shape, he said. "Yes," she said. "Exactly. It's a different shape." "That takes time to get used to," he said. "I'm in the middle of that myself." "Because of your wife?" "Yeah." "Does it get easier?" He thought about that honestly, which was the only way he knew how to think about things that mattered. "It gets different," he said. "Different is sometimes easier, and sometimes it's just different. But different is better than stuck." She was quiet again, then, "Thank you for everything. You didn't have to. You don't even know us." "I know enough," he said. After he hung up, he sat on the porch with his coffee in the cold and watched the mountain in the afternoon light, the high ridges still snow-covered, the lower slopes beginning to show the first suggestions of early spring in the thinning of the snowpack along the southern faces. He'd sat on this porch through 4 winters and 3 springs, and he knew the way the mountain looked in every season and every weather and every quality of light, and it had given him something, the mountain, the knowing of it, that he hadn't been able to name while he was in the middle of needing it, but could name now. It had given him a reason to stay present. Not happy, not healed, but present. Located. Accountable to a specific piece of ground on a specific day. It was not nothing that. It was, in fact, quite a lot. Sloane came out and sat in the other chair with her own coffee, and they didn't talk for a while, which was one of the things about being around her that he'd noticed gradually. And then all at once, she was comfortable with silence in a way that most people weren't, that ran counter to the image of the high-functioning executive type he'd expected when he found out who she was. She'd told him once, during the second visit, that she'd learned it from a decade of board meetings where the person who spoke first into a silence usually lost something. He'd said he'd learned it from a different kind of waiting, and she'd said she figured, and that had been the whole conversation. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "After all this is settled, professionally." She turned the mug in her hands. "I don't know yet," she said. "The honest answer is I haven't let myself think past the immediate process because every time I start to, there's another immediate thing." She paused. "I've been approached. Some people I respect want to build an aviation safety foundation. Independent, not attached to any company, focused on navigating the gap between engineering findings and executive action. The place where the GX7 report disappeared into." "That sounds like something you'd be good at," he said. "It's smaller than what I had," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Smaller isn't always less." She looked at him sideways. "You didn't just say that to make me feel better," she said. "I never say things to make people feel better," he said. "It's a character flaw." "It's actually one of the things I trust most about you," she said. He drank his coffee. The mountain sat where it sat. "Lily asked me last week if I was going to keep coming back," Sloane said. "I told her I didn't know what my schedule was going to look like, and she said that wasn't what she'd asked." "She does that," he said. "I know." A pause. "I told her yes, that I was going to keep coming back." He looked at her. "Was that all right?" she said. "Yeah," he said. "That was all right." She held his gaze for a moment with the directness she always had, and there was something in the directness now that was different from the first time. Not the measuring professional version, not the careful management of an unfamiliar situation, but the simple directness of someone who knew exactly where they were and had decided to be there without apology. "I'm not trying to be something for you that I'm not," she said. "I'm not trying to... I don't have a version of this that I've rehearsed. I just know that this mountain and this cabin and you and Lily are the realest things in my life right now, and I spent a long time prioritizing things that felt important and turned out to be mostly performance, and I don't want to do that anymore." "I'm not asking you to be anything," he said. "I know," she said. "That's actually what I'm talking about." The afternoon light was moving across the porch boards between their chairs, the specific low angle of early spring sun that was warmer than it looked, and the mountain above them was doing what mountains did, enduring, indifferent, magnificent in its indifference, offering nothing and taking nothing, just being the ground that everything else stood on. "Claire would have thought you were terrifying," he said. Sloane blinked. "What?" "She had a radar for women who knew what they wanted," he said. "She found them simultaneously admirable and exhausting." He paused. "She also would have thought you were exactly what I needed after she was gone. She had a radar for that too." Sloane was very quiet. "I don't say that to be..." He stopped, searched for the honest version. "I say it because she was real, and she's part of how I got here, and I don't want to act like she isn't. She's the reason Lily exists. She's the reason I came up this mountain. If she hadn't died the way she died, I wouldn't have been on this porch on the night your helicopter went down." He looked at the tree line. "I'm not grateful she's gone. I'll never be grateful she's gone. But I think she'd have had something to say about what came after." "What would she say?" Sloane asked. Her voice was careful, not fragile. Careful in the way of someone giving a moment the respect it was owed. "She'd say, 'Stop standing in the doorway,'" he said. "She was always telling me that. I had a habit of standing in doorways instead of going through them." He looked at Sloane. "She hated that about me." Sloane almost smiled. "It's a documented issue," she said. "I've noticed." "Yeah," he said. "I know." She reached across the gap between the chairs and put her hand over his on the armrest, and he turned his hand over and held it, and neither of them made it into more than it was, which was two people on a porch in the afternoon light, holding on to something that had been built from difficult materials and was, for that reason, likely to hold. Ocean. Spring came to the mountain with its usual lack of ceremony. The snow retreated up the slopes in increments, and the creek at the base of the property began to run with the particular urgency of meltwater, and Lily declared the diplomatic situation with Reginald the Crow fully resolved when he began appearing at the kitchen window each morning with a consistency that suggested investment rather than casual interest. She kept a log of his visits in a notebook with his name on the cover. The log had 17 entries by mid-March. Ethan started flying again. Not for rescue, not yet. That was a decision he was still living his way toward, one that would come when it came and not before. He started with a rented Cessna out of the regional airfield. Alone, no particular destination, just the act of going up and the act of coming back down. The first flight lasted 40 minutes, and he was sweating through the landing approach in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The second flight lasted an hour. By the fifth flight, he was doing the approach clean, and it was only the moment just after liftoff, when the ground fell away and the aircraft committed fully to the air, that still required an extra breath. He told Sloane about it the next time she called. "How did it feel?" she asked. "The first time? Like something I'd been afraid of for a reason," he said. "The fifth time? Like something I used to know how to do. And now? Like something I'm learning again," he said, "which is maybe where it should have been all along." Sloane's foundation, the Independent Aviation Safety Initiative, which she'd co-founded with two former FAA investigators and a structural engineer who'd worked the GX-7 analysis, had its first operational meeting in February and its first public briefing in March. The briefing was attended by 6 aviation companies, 2 congressional staffers, and a journalist from a trade publication who wrote a piece afterward that Ethan read on his phone at the kitchen counter and found accurate in every particular, which was not something he expected from journalism covering Sloane. She called him after the piece ran. "They spelled my name right," she said. "That's the standard?" he said. "For the past 6 months?" "Yes." He laughed. She heard it and went quiet in the way she did sometimes when something caught her off guard in a good direction, and he knew she was smiling without needing to see it. "The NTSB full review comes out in 3 weeks," she said. "Hale says the Claire case review is on the same timeline." "I know," he said. "He called me." "Are you ready for that?" He thought about it honestly. "I don't think ready is the right word," he said. "I think I'm—" He paused. "I've been sitting with the preliminary finding for 2 months. I know what the full review is going to say. The shape of it isn't going to change. I think I'm at peace with the shape." "That's different from 3 months ago," she said. "Yeah," he said, "it is." What he didn't say, because he didn't have the language for it yet, and she didn't need him to, was that the piece hadn't come from the investigation or the findings, or even from Sloane's disclosure, though those things had given it structure. The piece had come from the accumulated weight of ordinary days, from Lily's crow log and the fifth landing approach, and the firewood and the neighbor's dog and the legal pad on the desk, and dinners with too much pepper and the phone calls and the hand on the porch armrest, and the small, irreducible fact of being present in his own life rather than standing in the doorway of it, waiting for a reason to go through. Claire had been right about the doorways. She'd been right about most things, which was one of the things he'd loved about her, and one of the things that had made her maddening to argue with, and he thought about her now with the kind of love that had finally separated from the guilt, the clean version, the love that was just itself without needing to be an indictment of anyone including him. He missed her. He was going to miss her. That wasn't going to change, and he'd stopped needing it to. The NTSB full review released on a Wednesday in April. Claire Cole's crash was formally reclassified. The cause: navigation system failure resulting from a known and unaddressed software flaw in the GX-7 terrain following module. Contributing factors: reduced visibility, mountainous terrain, incorrect altitude data provided to the pilot. The original finding of pilot error was vacated. Both the pilot and the passenger were officially designated as victims of an equipment failure that should have been prevented. Ethan read the document at the kitchen table on a Wednesday morning while Lily was at school, and the spring light came through the window at a different angle than the winter light, warmer and more direct, reaching further across the floor. He read it once. Then he closed the laptop and he went outside. He walked to the ridge. Not the high ridge line, not the Sutter Creek Ridge where the storms happened, but the lower ridge above the cabin where he'd walked 1,000 times in 4 years. The one where he could see the full sweep of the mountain above and the valley below, where the light came in from the west in the afternoon and turned the whole world the color of something that didn't have a name. He stood on the ridge and he let it be what it was. He wasn't sure how long he stood there. Long enough that the light moved, long enough that the particular quality of the morning shifted into something closer to midday. He wasn't doing anything, not grieving, not cataloging, not running a debrief, just standing in a place he knew, feeling the weight of what had happened and what it meant, and letting the mountain be the mountain around him without needing it to do anything else. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. Lily. Mrs. Garrett let us out early, taking the bus home. Can Sloan come for dinner? He typed back, I'll ask her. Then he called Sloan. I read it, she said before he said anything. Yeah, he said. I'm in Seattle, she said. Foundation meeting this afternoon, but I can... Lily wants you for dinner, he said. A pause. Of course she does. Can you make it? I can make it, she said. I'll drive up after the meeting. I'll be there by 7. I'll keep dinner warm, he said. Don't start without me, she said. I want to be there. I know, he said. That's why I called. He stood on the ridge for a few more minutes after the call ended, phone in his hand, face turned toward the mountain. He thought about a woman who'd told him to stop standing in doorways. He thought about a 29-year-old pilot who had done everything right and been blamed for doing it. He thought about Nadia Reedy, who was finishing her junior year at the University of Oregon, and had texted him a photo of the NTSB document with 3 words. He's free now. He thought about Devlin Torres, who had sent him a handwritten note from his physical therapy, a single page that ended with, "My grandmother would have liked you." He thought about Lily's prologue and the 5th landing approach, and Sloane's hand on the porch armrest and the specific shape of a life that had been rebuilt from the inside out, not by cleaning up the damage so you couldn't see where it had been, but by building something real on top of it, with the damage as part of the foundation. That was the thing nobody told you about loss, he thought. They told you it would get better, which was true in the way that all oversimplifications were true, approximately at a distance. What they didn't tell you was that better wasn't the same as gone. Better was more like integrated. The thing that hurt you became part of the structure of you, load-bearing, and eventually you couldn't separate the grief from the person you'd become because of it, and the person you'd become because of it was someone who knew things that people who hadn't been through it didn't know. Things about time and patience and what actually mattered at the bottom of everything when you stripped away all the noise. He'd lost Claire on a mountain. He'd been given the reason to live on one. He didn't believe the universe was that tidy. He'd seen too much to believe in that kind of arithmetic. But he also knew that he was standing on a ridge in the April light, with a daughter who was on the bus home and had asked for the woman she wanted at the dinner table, and that later tonight that woman would drive up the mountain road in a rental car, and he would hear it coming, and the dog would bark, and Lily would appear from her room already talking before the door fully opened, and the 4 of them would sit around the table in the warm light of the cabin and eat dinner with too much pepper, and Reginald the Crow would be at the window in the morning, and Lily would log the visit, and the mountain would be the mountain, and that was enough. That was more than enough. It was in every way that actually counted, everything. That on the same ridge where he'd first heard the helicopter going down in the blizzard, on a clear evening in late April, when the last of the snow had pulled back to the high peaks, and the air smelled like cold water and pine and the particular mineral clarity of mountain spring, Ethan stood with Sloan and Lily and watched the valley below them go amber, and then rose, and then the deep blue that came in the last minutes before the light was fully gone. Lily was sitting on a flat rock with her notebook, recording something with the focused industry of a person documenting what mattered. The Crow had followed them up the trail, maintaining a skeptical distance of about 15 feet, which Lily had logged as closer than yesterday, possible breakthrough imminent. Sloan stood next to Ethan, and he could feel the warmth of her arm against his in the cooling air. "This is where you heard it," she said, "that night." "Yeah," he said, "about 200 meters north." Sound carries differently in a blizzard. It was closer than it seemed. What did you think when you heard it? He considered the honest answer. I thought someone was in trouble, he said, and then I stopped thinking and started moving. She was quiet for a moment. That's who you are, she said. Maybe, he said. It's also just what you do when someone needs help, and you're the person who can. Most people aren't that person, she said. Most people haven't practiced, he said. She turned to look at him, and the last of the evening light was on her face, and she looked nothing like the woman who'd been pressed against the door of a burning helicopter telling herself to breathe. She looked like herself, fully, the version that didn't require a professional context or a crisis to be present, just the actual Sloane Whitmore standing on a mountain in April with her shoulder against his. I'm going to stay, she said. Not just visits. I want to figure out what that looks like. If you want that. I want that, he said. I don't know how to do this, she said. I've been very good at a lot of things, and I don't really know how to do this. Nobody knows how to do this, he said. You just do it and find out. That's your advice? It's the only advice that works, he said. Lily looked up from her notebook. Are you two going to stand there talking, or are you watching the sunset? She said, with the patient authority of someone who had allocated this time for a specific purpose and expected it to be honored. Watching the sunset, Sloane said. Good, Lily said, and went back to her notebook. They watched the sunset. The valley below went from rose to deep blue to the first suggestion of dark, and the peaks above them held the light longer than anything else, the way high places always did, as if they were saving something the rest of the world had already let go. Ethan stood on the mountain that had taken things from him and given things back, with his daughter logging the behavior of a crow she'd befriended through patient strategic bread placement, and the woman who'd fallen out of the sky into his life and changed the shape of everything standing close enough that he could feel her breathing. He was not the same man who'd walked into the blizzard with a headlamp and an emergency pack and no thought except that someone needed help. He was not the man who'd spent 3 years in the weight of guilt that turned out to belong somewhere else. He was not the man who'd stood in the doorways of his own life waiting for a reason to go through. He was the man who had gone through. He was the man who knew that surviving something didn't make you whole and that being whole wasn't the point. That the point was the living of the actual days, imperfect and unremarkable and sometimes very hard, with the people who had earned the place beside you by showing up in the specific ways that mattered, not the grand ways, not the easy ways, but in the way Sloane had sat across the table and read an 11-year-old engineering report and decided she wasn't going to pretend she hadn't, and in the way Lily had handed a borrowed stranger a mug of soup and told her she didn't have that look anymore, the look like she'd forgotten she was going to be okay. You could spend your whole life waiting for the storm to end before you started living, or you could live in the middle of it, imperfectly and with cold hands, trusting that the ground was still there under the snow. The ground had always been there. The mountain had always held. He just had to stop running from it long enough to feel it under his feet. The last of the light left the peaks and the stars came in over the ridge, and Lily put her notebook away and stood up, and Sloane's hand found Ethan's in the dark, and they walked back down the mountain together, all three of them, toward the light of the cabin below.